Hello friends! So in today's video I want to continue my video series that I started a few months back where I discuss different forms of vegan activism that are popular today. And in today's video I want to talk about the Liberation Pledge. For those of you who don't know what that is, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'll include a video clip of myself taking the Liberation Pledge here.
Right, we're practicing. I place my hand on my heart and I solemnly swear to work for a peaceful world and to treat all animals with care.
I'm totally kidding, that's not the Liberation Pledge. That's me singing what is a vegan children's song at vegan camp that I went to last summer. Shout out to Lighthouse Landing. But seriously though, off of the Liberation Pledge's website, it consists of 1, publicly refusing to eat animals, live vegan. That's what you're doing already, I'm assuming, if you're watching this. 2, publicly refuse to sit where animals are being eaten.
You can't sit with us!
And 3, encourage others to take the pledge. It says publicly a couple of times there, but I'm pretty sure they mean privately as well. You have to live vegan in the public sphere and the private sphere, and they talk about living vegan and not eating animals' bodies in a general sense as well later down on the website, so I don't know why they stated it publicly. Also, one of their FAQs that they have on their website that I want to address quickly is whether or not you should still uphold the pledge if it interferes with your job, and they don't really give a straightforward answer. They kind of like dance around giving a definitive yes you should or no. They just say we sympathize that this is difficult and here's a community you can access if you want to ask questions. So that was weird. But on the Liberation Pledge's website they actually give historical precedent for why they've started this, which makes my job a lot easier. I don't have to look it up myself. So basically they talk about how in 1890 a campaign like this was started in China to stop the practice of binding women's feet. So what they did was they got people to take the pledge that they wouldn't bind their daughters' feet, and they also wouldn't allow their sons to marry women who had bound feet. And it was really effective apparently at getting the practice of foot binding to come to an end. So before I talk more about the Liberation Pledge itself, I want to discuss the lens that I use to look at different forms of animal activism. It's a series of questions I ask that I call the 3 Ps. I like to ask, is it principled, is it practical, and is it powerful? By principled, I just mean, is it feasible for people to actually do it, or would this form of activism require people to quit their jobs, abandon their family duties, and just hit the road and do activism full-time? Probably not practical for most people. By principled, I mean, does it have the right motivations behind it? Is it actually promoting something good? And then there's powerful, and what I mean by that is it effective? So any form of activism can take on any of these 3 Ps, or none of them, or just 2 of them. So an example of an activism that's principled and powerful, but not practical, I would call sacrificial activism. It's really good at changing hearts and minds. It has the right principle, you're promoting animal liberation, but it might require you to quit your day job. Then there's practical and principled, but not powerful. This at best would just be a neutral outcome, and at worst it would actually be detrimental to the movement. An example of this would just be going up to someone and yelling in their face about animal rights. Probably not going to do anything. And then there's the last one, which would be powerful, practical, but not principled, which might be environmental activism, trying to get people to eat a plant-based diet for health. This might get people to open up their hearts to veganism and animal rights, but if you're promoting these things purely for the health component or the environmental component, you can be really good at doing what you do. You might be really good at getting people to not consume animal products for environmental and health reasons, but it doesn't have that core principle behind it. I'm not saying that all activism that isn't vegan activism doesn't have principles. I'm just talking about this within a vegan context. So of course, if you're interested in some other social cause or whatever, I'm not saying that your activism isn't principled. So which is the Liberation Pledge? Again, there's going to be a high degree of subjectivity, but I will just make a generalization here. In my opinion, I would classify the Liberation Pledge as sacrificial activism. It's potentially powerful. It's certainly principled, but I don't know if I would necessarily call it practical in a general sense. You know, if we work in business, you have to meet with clients, have business meetings over lunch or dinner. It's a requirement of your job. Obviously, it's not practical for you to take the Liberation Pledge. I mean, you could quit your job and just do activism full time, but I think it's actually useful to have people in the business world or whatever line of work we're talking about here. Here we're just talking about business. We're vegan and interacting with non-vegans. You know, we want vegans in every walks of life to reach more people. Another example would be a teacher. You have to eat lunch with your kids as you supervise them. You can't refuse to do that. Otherwise, you might not have your job. But with that being said, I think the pros of the Liberation Pledge are that it does have the potential to be effective activism. It can have a measurable change on the amount of animal products being consumed, because if your family and friends want to hang out with you, they're gonna have to eat vegan. So that will create less demand for animal products. Also, I think it forces people to take what you're doing seriously. Like, no, this is what must happen. This is not a joke, and I cannot entertain you as you are committing an injustice. Of course, the downside is people might say, oh well, and just never eat with you, and then they won't see how easy and tasty a vegan diet can be. They won't see that you're just like everyone else. You just eat plants instead of animal products. So when I was making this video and planning it out, I thought about the question of why is it that we as vegans are more tolerant of speciesism than we are of sexism or racism or whatever. You know, we might be willing to sit down and eat a meal with dead animals on the table, but we would probably be unwilling to sit down and share a meal with someone who's blatantly sexist or racist or whatever. At least I know I would be unwilling to just be friends with someone who's straight up sexist. The immediate and obvious thing that comes to mind is that we currently live in a society that accepts animal abuse, speciesism, but we don't accept sexism and racism. You know, we can debate to like which degree sexism and racism still exists, but we're at least at the point where you, for most people, just can't come out and say like women are stupid and all they are baby making machines. But with that being said, we do make exceptions for people who might be maybe a little brainwashed due to their upbringing. You know, there's the trope of sexist, racist grandma. I think that's kind of like not as offensive to us because we recognize that she grew up in a different time, and you know, at this point it's kind of hard for her to see things from a different perspective. At the same time, we as a society are sympathetic to people who might have grown up in a family or community that was extremely sexist or racist or whatever, but we give them a chance to like unlearn those things that they've been taught and to actually understand that those were hurtful and harmful, and to see the world in a better perspective. We give people that chance because we understand that it's not their fault. So in the same way, we currently live in a society that's been brainwashed to accept abusing and killing some animals, but protecting others. So again, while we can debate to which extent sexism and racism is a problem currently in our society, I think we can all accept that speciesism is certainly more accepted and certainly more widespread worldwide. So I think in that sense, it's useful to look at other widespread, really massive social problems out there in the world and see how we deal with those things. An example might be the situation in China in the province of Xinjiang. Xinjiang is a northern province in China, and there a lot of ethnic minorities and religious minorities exist, specifically Muslims. And about 1 million of those people have been forcibly put in re-education centers. I think we all really know what that means. And obviously this is a gross human rights violation. Like, imagine if your government just forced you to go live in some re-education center against your will. That's clearly inhumane and cruel. And of course, there have been many reports of human rights violations and abuses occurring in these centers. So what do we as a society expect our governments to do about this? So I'm Canadian. Do I expect my Canadian government to completely cut all political and economic ties with China? I think that'd be a principled thing to do, but is that practical? Maybe a less heavy example would be one that was brought to my attention from the Phlegm Face.
So a vegan bride has infuriated social media users after revealing she'd banned her meat-eating relatives from her big day.
So yeah, this woman wants to have a wedding, doesn't want any non-vegans to be there. This isn't the same as the Liberation Pledge. I think it would be like one step like above, like just refusing to eat with all non-vegans. And I realize this is her wedding and she's not necessarily looking at it as activism, but for the purposes of this video, we are. I would say this is probably an example of well-principled activism, right? In the same way you wouldn't want a bunch of racists and sexists at your wedding, you wouldn't want a bunch of speciesists. However, it's not practical for most people. It would alienate you from your family, and B, I don't know if it's the most powerful. I think a vegan wedding would be a great way to show people how good vegan food is and how you can be like just like everyone else, just do it in a vegan way. So all in all, what are my general thoughts on the Liberation Pledge? I think whether or not you should do it or even just try it out for a bit is extremely situational. I know for myself, I don't know if that would be the most effective means of going about my activism, but at the same time, like I've heard of people who have taken the Liberation Pledge and have a lot of success with it. People in my own community that I've talked to. There's a YouTuber who did a video on the Liberation Pledge, Richardz Reality, he's a small channel, and I left a comment and he replied to me saying it's been really great and effective for him. So I think this is something that we as vegans have to decide for themselves whether or not it's the best form of activism that they can be doing. That's all I have to say about that, I think. I realize this video doesn't really offer any concrete answers. I'm not saying a definitive yes, you should do it or no, you shouldn't do it. Again, this is very subjective, so I'd love to hear your opinions down below. I don't want this to be the end of the conversation. I want the conversation to continue down in the comments. Feel free to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already. I post videos every Thursday. Follow me on my socials. I'm pretty active on Instagram and Twitter. And okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.